Hi, good morning, and welcome to Con Abogados. My name is Jeremy Love, and this is attorney Kimberly Gubert. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy a esta charla Café con Abogados. Es un show que estamos haciendo bilingüe, por eso muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Otra vez me llamo Jeremy Love, abogado de inmigración. Tengo la abogada aquí, Kimberly Gubert. We're here in the Love Law Firm in Hoover, Alabama. Today, our topic is the elections, Daca, and more. So we're going to cover a little bit about the elections and how the Biden administration will affect immigration policy going forward. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, I think, and more interesting than it would have been if we were looking at another 4 years with the Trump administration with immigration. So happy to have everybody joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to message us right here on Facebook in the event. And also, if you're looking for any additional information after, feel free to check out our website, loveimmigration.com. Tenemos mucha información en nuestro sitio web, abogadolove.com. Y por favor, pueden mandar mensajes aquí con preguntas. Estamos a la orden a contestar sus preguntas en vivo. Okay. Kim, how are you doing today?
Doing good, how are you?
Good. Tenemos otra vez el café.
Yo tengo té.
I'm not sure if we allow that, but we'll let it slide.
I've had 2 cups of coffee today already, so I figured I should slow it down a little. Drink some good old tea.
Well, I'll be checking to see any questions we're getting live here. So thank you for submitting any questions you have again. So we'll start off talking about the elections. I want to thank everybody for voting in the elections if you were able to do so. As I think a lot of people have mentioned, this was the highest voting participation that the country's ever seen. So I think that shows a lot about how much people care about what's happening in this country. Quiero mencionar también gracias a los inmigrantes que han votado en las elecciones. Las personas que vinieron acá y son ciudadanos ahorita pueden pueden votar. Y el derecho de voto está muy importante aquí en este país para tener su voz aquí de lo que está pasando, lo que quieren pasar aquí en los Estados Unidos. Well, so as we see, barring some type of last-minute change, it looks like the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be our president and vice president as of January 20th. So I want to talk a little bit about what a president can do with immigration policy and what requires Congress, what Congress needs to do, or what Congress can change as it relates to immigration law. So a couple quick things about that. A president can change immigration policy, but not immigration law. So a president can, for example, establish DACA, which is that's deferred action for childhood arrivals, which is a priority in who they're going to remove from the U.S. without status, and who they're going to offer a work permit. It's a temporary type immigration change, and that's something that a president can do. Additionally, a president can change their enforcement priorities when it comes to removing someone from the U.S., but there are other things that are more permanent, like providing a path to permanent residence, like a DREAM Act. That requires Congress. So that's something that we'll have to see what happens going forward, especially with the Senate. And that's something Kim and I were talking about earlier, that there are still 2 Senate seats that remain undecided in Georgia. And there's a runoff in January, so we'll see what happens with the balance of power in the Senate. Great, so Kim, what are some expected changes that we think that the Biden administration can do pretty quickly?
So anything that Trump changed with an executive order can easily, I shouldn't say easily, but quickly could be changed back or reversed through another executive order. For example, the travel restrictions, just a quick little, so I can list them off real quick. Iran, Libya, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Venezuela, North Korea, Nigeria, Sudan, and Myanmar. Those are currently on a travel restriction. And President Trump did that through an executive order. So if President-elect Biden so decides on his first day to do an executive order basically reversing that, that would be in effect immediately. Same with Daca, because it was an executive order, there would be President-elect Biden, all he would need to do is on the first day do an executive order that USCIS needs to reinstate the program in accepting initial applications, and that would be very quickly as well. I believe the 2-year grant would also fall, right? The 2-year restriction that President Trump restricted it to 1 year DACA, that can be easily, quickly reversed into the 2-year, or I guess not reversed, but put back, reinstated. And then also President-elect Biden, so hard to say, President-elect Biden. I want to call him President Biden, but you don't say that until he's inaugurated.
You can just say Biden if you want.
Biden. Biden can also quickly change the temporary protected status changes that President Trump did.
Estamos recibiendo preguntas sobre DACA. Y es algo que yo puedo hablar ahorita un poquito sobre la situación en este momento con DACA. Pues en este momento recibimos una decisión de la Corte en Nueva York, pienso. Fue un tribunal federal que indicó que el jefe de Homeland Security, ¿verdad? ¿Cómo se llama? Wolf. ¿Verdad?
Pues, yo pienso, sí, yo pienso.
Pues la persona que está en cargo de USCIS, que es parte de inmigración que da los beneficios, esta persona, la manera en que Trump puso a esta persona en cargo de la organización no fue constitucional. Por eso todas las decisiones que él hizo fue inconstitucional. Por eso la manera en que Trump terminó la DACA no fue constitucional. Por eso, técnicamente, sí, inmigración debe aceptar las solicitudes de DACA por primera vez. Pero el problema es, no hemos recibido una notificación de inmigración que sí están aceptando. Por eso estamos casi en la misma situación. Este anuncio está muy reciente, por eso no estoy seguro si inmigración va a aceptar la solicitud de DACA de inicial en este momento. Otra vez, y también no estamos seguros si cuando aprueben la DACA, las renovaciones de DACA en este momento, que van a dar DACA por 2 años o solo 1 año. Pienso que inmigración va a esperar hasta el 20 de enero, cuando empieza presidente Biden, porque pienso que inmigración en este momento no quiere empezar a aceptar las solicitudes de DACA iniciales. Por eso vamos a ver, pero eso es lo que pienso.
Which on day 1, if Biden really wanted to, he could fire the head of Department of Homeland Security, put his own person there, and then once that person's in charge, technically they would start, I guess, accepting the DACA applications that very next week.
Vamos a ver muchos cambios, y pienso que uno de los primeros cambios que vamos a recibir con Biden es que va a empezar otra vez a recibir las solicitudes de DACA iniciales. Esto puede tardar tiempo, no sé exactamente cuánto tiempo va a tardar antes que inmigración va a aceptar las solicitudes de DACA, las solicitudes iniciales de DACA, pero vamos a ver, pero pienso que eso es algo que Biden va a hacer muy pronto como presidente.
As of right now, they're just rejecting the applications. So technically, if you had applied for DACA initial and it was rejected, your money should have been returned to you. If you want, you could just apply again. See what happens. Just keep applying. I mean, as long as they're returning the money, there's really no risk in just applying, because you never know when that moment is going to be that immigration says, okay, we're going to start accepting it now. Anyone that comes in, we're taking.
That's something I would talk to an attorney about, because the only time I would consider possibly not filing DACA is if you have a criminal record. For example, right now it may be a little bit risky to do that, and you may not be eligible anyway. Also, if you've been removed previously and have re-entered, I would caution DACA. And there's a couple different things I want to mention. One of them is one issue is accepting initial DACA. Another one is expanded DACA. Because right now, in order to qualify for DACA, the rule is you had to have been here before June 15, 2007. Part of the expansion that Obama tried to do was that people who've been here, who weren't here in 2007, but were here January 1st, 2010, would also be eligible. And that currently is not something that immigration is accepting. It's because that was stopped when Obama was president. So we'll see what Biden does with that. But I just want to mention that expanded DACA right now is not an option. But initial DACA, there are a lot of people who were not 15 years of age in 2017 when Trump ended DACA, initial DACA, who now are 15 years old. And that's one of the requirements, you have to be at least 15. So for those people, hopefully as soon as they're accepting initial DACA, and that's something we'll be paying attention to, I would recommend filing for that as soon as possible. So that's just something I wanted to mention. Great. So, yeah, you mentioned the travel ban and TPS.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about some long-term changes.
Oh, advanced parole.
Oh, yeah. Another big one that Trump announced, this was earlier this year, I believe, when he was in the
You're talking about DACA?
No, I'm talking about DACA, advanced parole.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like 3 months ago, I thought.
Yeah,
right?
we're pretty recent.
4 months ago?
When the Trump administration said that people with DACA could no longer, except for in extreme cases, request advanced parole, which is a travel permit, to be able to go to their home country, for example, to visit a sick relative or someone who recently passed away. That was an option previously. The Trump administration ended it for most situations for DACA. And that was helpful in a lot of ways because once you travel on advanced parole and come back, you are admitted with inspection. So if you marry a U.S. citizen, you could adjust your status here in the U.S. without needing a waiver or returning to your home country through consular processing. So that's something that if Biden allows advanced parole again, and he can do that himself, he doesn't need Congress, that would help a lot of people.
And you could leave for a number of reasons, not just because a family member is sick or there's an emergency. Then, you know, there used to be programs for DACA recipients specifically for them to allow to go for summer school.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah, study abroad was a good one. As well as work as well. Work-based reasons. Por eso vamos a ver lo que pasa con este permiso de viaje. Pero si Biden, pienso que eso es lo que va a pasar. Si Biden permite otra vez a personas a solicitar este tipo de personas con DACA, solicitar el advanced parole, que es un permiso de viaje a otro país y regresar, esto puede ayudar a muchas personas porque da opciones a personas que no han llegado antes con visa. Por eso es algo que vamos a ver lo que pasa en enero cuando empieza Biden como presidente.
So what are some of these long-term changes that could happen?
One of them is extreme vetting. That was something, and I use it in quotes, because that was something that Trump said. It was really just a political hot button word, in my opinion, because some of the changes that were made, for example, didn't involve who could come here. It involved people who were already here and requiring more interviews, for example. Like previously, they generally didn't require an interview if you were petitioning for your child or your parent and at the USCIS office. Generally, the interviews were only for spouses. But now they're requiring interviews for everybody. So I don't really see, I mean, the background checks are the same. So I think really it's just a political thing. So that's something that Biden could change over time, is to limit the number of interviews that are required, which would speed up the process and the backlog.
Which the whole point of an interview is just to prove that what they're saying is true. When you have a child and you're on the birth certificate, it's really not much you can ask about that. Whereas the spouses, you know, they ask about whether or not you're truly married.
Sí, por eso es posible que vamos a ver lo que pasa con esto, pero pienso que en el futuro Biden puede indicar que no va a hacer más entrevistas para todos, como por ejemplo cuando una persona hace una petición aquí en los Estados Unidos por su padre, por ejemplo, es posible que en el futuro, como antes, como fue con la administración de Obama, que esta persona no tiene que hacer una entrevista aquí en los Estados Unidos. Si cuando la persona está en otro país y quiere entrar a los Estados Unidos, sí hay entrevistas, eso fue antes también, pero vamos a ver lo que pasa con las personas que ya están aquí en los Estados Unidos y no son esposos. Okay. What else we got?
Public charge.
Yeah, oh yeah. Voy a hablar un poquito sobre la carga pública también. La carga pública fue parte de la ley de inmigración hace muchos años, pero la administración de Trump el año pasado indicó que van a interpretar la carga pública, la ley de carga pública, diferente que antes. La persona que está solicitando la residencia o un visa de turista, por ejemplo, tiene que mostrar que en el futuro no va a necesitar ayuda del gobierno. Por eso quiero mencionar que en este momento está en el aire, porque hay una Corte Suprema que indicó que la manera que Trump hizo esto no fue constitucional. Por eso, en este momento, no tiene que mostrar que la persona no es una carga pública, que quiere la residencia o una visa de inmigrante. Pero vamos a ver lo que pasa, porque está en la corte y no estamos seguros. Pero vamos a ver lo que pasa con esto. Pero Biden puede cambiar la carga pública también. Indica que la ley, o cómo van a interpretar esta ley, es lo mismo que fue antes. Que es que si tiene un sponsor, no tiene que mostrar cosas como los impuestos o o los biles, o si la persona no habla inglés, esto puede afectar su caso, o si la persona es vieja o tiene problemas de salud. Todo eso bajo Trump puede ser un problema en un proceso para la residencia o la visa. Pero vamos a ver lo que pasa con Biden, pero pienso que él puede cambiar la ley de la carga pública.
Which, because that one is in court,
Yeah.
hopefully it actually won't take as long to change that as it would if Biden did it himself. Like if he wanted to propose the rule and all that, I think it takes, 4 months, 5 months, something like longer than that. Because there's a lot of admin procedures that have to happen when, someone changes a rule. But since it's already in court, hopefully we could just have a judge fix that problem for us quicker than it would be if Biden did it by himself.
That's something with immigration law. It's really important to have an attorney working for you who has experience with immigration in your type of case, because immigration law changes so frequently. You have to know not only what the law is now, but what it was before and what it could be in the future. So it's difficult, but in my opinion, it makes it fun.
I'll give an example of last week. I think it was last Wednesday. It might have been the Wednesday before, but in the morning, we received a court notice or a notice from someone who monitors the courts that you no longer had to prove that you were going to be able to support yourself when you get a residency when you're trying to get residency. And then, I kid you not, 5 hours later, another court said, nope, you know what, we're ignoring that one, and now you have to prove that you can sustain yourself if you're trying to get residency. Like, that was a 5 hours. Within 24 hours, it was you had to do something, you didn't have to do it, now you do have to do it. Like, it was 24 hours of 3 different decisions. So, having an attorney who has the connections to know what's going on 24/7 is beneficial.
So, lo que estamos indicando que es muy importante tener un abogado en su caso que tiene experiencia en su tipo de caso, porque la ley de inmigración cambia cada día, cada hora, y por eso usted merece un experto que puede servirle en su caso. Y por eso estamos aquí. Otra vez, me llamo Jeremy Love, abogado de inmigración. Tenemos con nosotros la abogada Kimberly Gubert, que trabaja aquí conmigo en nuestra oficina en Hoover. Si tiene una pregunta, el número de teléfono es 205-323-8727. Y también hay mucha información en nuestro sitio web, abogadolove.com. Thank you everybody for joining us. Again, I'm Jeremy Love, and I have Kimberly Gubert with me. We're immigration attorneys, and we practice here in Hoover, and we have clients all over. We actually were recently just up in Huntsville and had a great day there doing appointments and helping people with the immigration issues. So feel free to give us a call if you have any questions or want to schedule an appointment at 205-323-8727. Okay, so we received a few questions.
Real quickly,
yeah.
I will say the last thing just to note on some of the changes that potentially will change rather quickly, or I guess in a couple months, is the Remain in Mexico policy. That with asylum seekers right now, Trump has effectively blocked almost anyone from coming in from Mexico, and they have to stay in Mexico while their asylum applications are pending. Biden has indicated that he would want to try and change this. However, he also might. There are some sources out there that are saying he might actually just expand upon that and allow the officers at the border to adjudicate the asylum applications, basically provide decisions on it, so that way it's a quicker process. But that one, it's either he's gonna make it to where everyone does their court quicker on the border, or they're going to allow those immigrants to come into the U.S. while they wait for their asylum applications to have a decision. Just wanted to quickly throw that out there.
Thank you.
Okay, so questions?
Yeah, I had a couple on phone, but go ahead and hit me with the ones that we've got before here.
So I have one that's kind of a pretty good one to answer. Someone asked if they have DACA right now. Do they need to, or can they apply for other immigration status?
The answer is yes. A DACA case doesn't really affect a different path to become a permanent resident, for example. So if you have DACA and you want to at the same time apply to become a permanent resident, then yeah, that's definitely something you can do. Now, the way that you go about becoming a permanent resident depends on a number of things. For example, do you have someone who can petition for you, like a spouse, parent who's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, or a child who's at least 21 years of age? Also, the manner in which you came into the U.S. Did you come into the U.S. with a visa or without? And all that can affect your process to become a permanent resident, for example.
Also, if you have DACA, it might be beneficial to visit an immigration attorney every 6 months, maybe once a year, because you could be eligible for things that don't require having a family member with status. There's a lot of immigration statuses out there that have nothing to do with a family member having status, and you might be eligible for one of those. So, it might be good to talk to an attorney every once in a while just to make sure you're not missing anything.
Yeah, so I have a question right here from someone who's a U.S. citizen, has been married to someone who's an immigrant for several years, has kids together, and her husband doesn't have any criminal issues, and wanted to know the possibility about him becoming a permanent resident. Now, that's a great question, and again, it depends on, it's definitely possible for him. It's possible that he has a path to become a permanent resident, but the process depends on how he came into the U.S., if he has left and re-entered the U.S., because if he came in with a visa and there aren't any major criminal issues, hasn't left the U.S. or had immigration issues, the path to become a permanent resident can happen here in the U.S. It's adjustment of status. We can do it all here in the U.S., and it's something that isn't as complicated as someone who needs a waiver. If he came in with crossing the border without inspection, as we call it, and hasn't left and re-entered, hasn't been removed from the U.S., then generally what we do is we can file a petition. It's a family-based petition showing valid marriage in good faith, and then we have to file a waiver. And the waiver shows how the U.S. citizen family would suffer without him here in the U.S. But part of the process does involve an interview and medical exam, fingerprints, in the country of origin. So if he's from Mexico, for example, he would have to go to Ciudad Juarez and do the interview, medical exam, and fingerprints. And that takes about 2 weeks. So as long as there aren't any issues, and this is why it's really important to have an attorney who knows how this process works, because if there are any issues it happens at the border, he could get stuck there for an extended period of time. So that's why, yes, it is possible, but it depends on the circumstances. Estoy explicando un poquito sobre el proceso de una persona que está casada con un ciudadano, por ejemplo, y quiere arreglar a un esposo. Pues el proceso depende de cómo esta persona llegó al país, si tiene antecedentes o si tenía una deportación o problemas con migración, puede afectar el camino. Si la persona llegó con visa y está casada con un ciudadano, el proceso podemos hacer todo aquí, en general, si no tiene antecedentes, a tener la residencia. Si llegó por la frontera, por ejemplo, y no tenía visa, hacemos una petición familiar y después de la petición, en general, tenemos que hacer un perdón. Y el perdón, para obtener la aprobación del perdón, tenemos que mostrar cómo la familia, que son ciudadanos o residentes, pueden sufrir mucho sin esta persona aquí en los Estados Unidos. Parte del proceso incluye una entrevista, examen médico y huellas, gracias, en su país de origen. Por eso tiene que salir por como 2 semanas. Por esa razón está muy importante que tiene un abogado que sabe cómo este proceso funciona para evitar problemas en su país de origen. Okay.
Yo tengo una otra pregunta.
Muy bien.
¿Cuándo anticipa un cambio con Daca? Kind of answered that, but...
Yeah. Pienso que vamos a recibir un cambio de Daca muy rápido con Biden. Pienso que en enero. Es posible que él va a anunciar lo que va a hacer muy pronto. Indicó alguna información que eso fue parte del proceso de las elecciones, pero él dijo que va a iniciar, aceptar aplicaciones de Daca iniciales otra vez. Por eso vamos a ver cómo esto pasa con Daca, pero pienso que sí, personas que no tienen Daca en este momento y no tenían antes, en enero, por ejemplo, es posible que puedan empezar a solicitar la Daca. Puede tardar un poco más tiempo, pero pienso que vamos a recibir un anuncio en enero.
Ok. Tengo la Daca de 1 año. ¿Debo solicitar ahora para intentar obtener la Daca de 2 años?
Pues, en general, si su Daca se vence en menos que 6 meses, recomiendo renovar en este momento. Porque las renovaciones están tardando tiempo. Es posible que pueda tardar 6 meses. Por eso, si tiene la Daca por 1 año y se vence antes de como mayo, recomiendo, pero no hay DACAs que de 1 año que van a vencerse en mayo, porque eso empezó hace como 2 meses. ¿Verdad?
Yeah.
Por eso, si su DACA se vence en menos que 6 meses, por eso antes de mayo, recomiendo renovar ahorita.
Which also you would have to wait till Biden makes that change.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you file right now, it's possible that, because it won't be approved until next year, so it's possible to be for 2 years, even the people who are getting them right now, like in the last week or so, have been getting them for 1 year. So it's up in the air. We'll see what happens. But if your DACA...
Well, that was another thing is Trump made it to where you can't apply before 6 months, right? Before your expiration. So even if you were to apply, you have to wait no matter what until 6 months before your expiration. So even if you wanted the 2 year, you're still going to have to wait until...
Yeah, my recommendation just in general is that if it expires in less than 6 months, go ahead and renew now. Because it can take time, and I don't want you to have a gap where you don't have your status or you don't have a driver's license, for example. So I'd go ahead and renew now if it's less than 6 months.
Those are all the previously submitted questions.
Okay. I have one right here. Tengo una pregunta, es sobre mi hija. Ella y yo entramos en 2015 pidiendo asilo y el asilo fue negado porque mis pruebas llegaron después de mi corte y nos dieron salida voluntaria. Mi pregunta es si todavía tenemos posibilidades de arreglar algún estatus migratorio. Por eso la solicitud de asilo fue rechazado porque las pruebas llegaron después de la fecha de la corte. ¿Qué piensas sobre este asunto?
When was
They arrived in 2015. It doesn't say when it was denied.
Okay. Was it they in court? Sorry, they were in court when they applied.
Yeah, I think so.
So that one, you know, is going to be something Biden will have to change because Trump just, I think it was like 3 weeks ago, something like that. What's today's date? November. Yeah. If you have been previously denied asylum, you'll be prevented from getting immigration status for different reasons, especially if it was in court. That's going to be a very complicated case. I would recommend talking to an attorney because court's kind of the last door before before having to be deported. So it's kind of like if you can apply and then you get with USCIS, you get denied, then you get put into court. And so court's kind of that. There's really not much after court, so once you're in court, you have to stay there, so that one actually might be kind of complicated. But that's going to have to be something that if Biden changes the rules on the new asylum restrictions that he just did, I want to say it was like 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Sí, pues sobre asilo, Trump indicó si usted fue rechazado para asilo en la corte, no puede solicitar el asilo otra vez. Por eso es algo que vamos a ver lo que pasa con Biden y si ofrece otra oportunidad de solicitar asilo después que recibió una negación de su caso. Vamos a ver lo que pasa con este asunto. Pero en este momento no es una opción de solicitar asilo otra vez. Pero una diferencia es que si no fue en la corte, pero su caso fue rechazado con inmigración, es otro tipo de cosa. En general recibe otra oportunidad en la corte al solicitar asilo. Okay. Estoy recibiendo algunas preguntas sobre los patrocinadores. Pienso que eso es sobre en un caso de cuando una persona está solicitando la residencia por un familiar, necesita un patrocinador, un sponsor. Y Trump cambió eso también. Antes, cualquier persona que es residente o ciudadano tenía la opción de ser su patrocinador si el peticionario no tiene suficientes ingresos. Por eso, si yo estoy casado con una ciudadana y ella no tiene suficientes ingresos para ser mi sponsor, podemos obtener a otra persona como Kimberly de ser el sponsor en el caso. Y eso no es problema porque conocemos. Pero inmigración simplemente indica que tenemos que mostrar la relación. Por eso Kimberly tiene que hacer una carta a mí que indica que si yo necesito ayuda en el futuro, ella está a la orden y el oficial tiene la opción de hacer la decisión si esto es válido. Si en realidad, si yo tengo problemas con mis finanzas, que Kimberly sí va a ayudar. Por eso la carta ayuda también si es un familiar o un amigo que yo conozco por varios años. Por eso, eso no solo que necesita un sponsor, porque tiene que mostrar la relación entre ustedes dos. Por eso, y ellos están solicitando un poco más pruebas también de los ingresos, no solo esos transcripts de los taxes, no solo los 1040, necesito también los transcripts del IRS, necesita los talones de cheque, prueba que la persona es ciudadano o residente y también prueba de la relación, por eso una carta, o si son hermanos, actas de nacimiento, ese tipo de cosas. Lo que recomiendo en este momento, porque pienso que vamos a recibir cambios sobre Daca, por ejemplo. ¿Qué puede hacer una persona que quiere solicitar la Daca por primera vez? En este momento no estoy seguro si están aceptando. Por eso lo que recomiendo es empezar a juntar las pruebas que necesito. Y esto es, las pruebas muestran su estancia aquí en los Estados Unidos desde el año 2007. Por eso lo que está muy importante son los documentos de la escuela, las notas de la escuela.
Diploma.
El diploma tiene que mostrar que sí ha graduado o que sí está en los casos en este momento o que recibió el GED. Esto también califica. Documentos médicos ayudan, algunas fotos que tienen la fecha, esto ayuda.
And if you don't have your high school diploma or a GED, that's okay. Just enroll now.
Yeah.
I think you can still enroll right now for spring, because also if we can just prove that you're trying to get your GED, or currently studying in a program to study for the GED test, that would be sufficient too. And
it's been 3 years since anyone could file an initial doc application that we know they're going to accept, so we could see some changes with that. But yes, we filed and had approvals for a lot of DACAs who didn't have their GED yet, but they were in classes to get their GED, and they were approved. So you just have to show it's a reputable program. So in general, the programs in community colleges, like Jeff State, Lawson State, they're all reputable programs. And if you're enrolled in those types of GED classes, that's something that would be helpful.
And you have to finish.
Yeah.
You'd have to, the first time you would do it, you'd prove that you're in the class, and then, when it comes time to renew, you'd have to prove that you got it.
You also need a current ID. So if you don't have a current passport, I would go renew your passport now. I know the consulate's going to be, they're going to be somewhere soon in Alabama, I forget where it is, but they're not going to be here in Birmingham, but I know they're coming.
So there are actually, so I also looked into this, there is a way for someone who is not a citizen to get a state ID with Alabama. The only thing is you would need some form of a picture ID, so if your school, like let's say you don't have a passport, but your school gives out, I know some schools have student IDs that have a picture on there, that would count as an ID that you could use to get a state ID, because they just need, I believe it's like a birth certificate, from your home country, proof you're in school, which you could use transcripts, and then if you have a school ID, you could get a state ID if you need that. Just, some people like having a little ID just to say that this is me.
Quiero decir algo sobre las matrículas de México. Antes era un poco de, pues inmigración a veces no aceptaron las matrículas de México, pero en este momento sí, porque las nuevas son un poco más seguros. Por eso pienso que sí están aceptando las matrículas. En general el pasaporte es mejor, pero si tiene la matrícula debe funcionar también. But, and I just saw that.
You're saying a Mexico ID?
The Mexican, the matricula ID, the matricula, that they are now accepting the new ones. They weren't the old ones. So, y yo tengo aquí información que indica que el consulado de México va a llegar a Obregón muy pronto. Pero pienso que hay información en mi sitio web, o en mi página de Facebook. Pero eso es donde van a llegar muy pronto. Por eso recomiendo renovar el pasaporte si no tiene que está corriente. Okay. Just checking to see if we have any other questions.
Preguntas. I think we hit everything that we were wanting to talk about today. If anyone ever has any questions that are unrelated or that you think of later, feel free to reach out, message us on Facebook. I will admit sometimes I only check my Facebook messages once a week, but I do check them. And then the Love Law Firm Facebook, that one gets checked almost daily, just because we have different people that can check it. So.
Sí, y podemos atenderle por teléfono en este momento también, si no puede llegar por video. Hay mucha información en nuestro sitio web otra vez, y también vamos a continuar a poner la información aquí en Facebook. Por eso lo que recomiendo es chequear la información que tenemos, porque solo vamos a poner la información confiable para ustedes. Y pues, sí, estamos aquí con las preguntas que usted tiene. Estamos aquí en Birmingham, a veces hacemos citas también en Huntsville. Vamos a regresar pronto, no tenemos la fecha concreta todavía, pero vamos a estar en Huntsville otra vez pronto. Pero estamos aquí en Birmingham como siempre a la orden. Pues, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll try this about once a month, so we'll be back soon and hopefully have more updates with what's happening with immigration and what we can expect soon.
And also, submit your questions because, we'll try to answer them every time we do this.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day y nos vemos muy pronto.